You have $390 million, and not one person in your life knows it. Not the woman who cuts your hair. Not the guys you play cards with on Thursday nights. Not your own brother, who still thinks he's the one in the family who did well. You're not lying to anyone. You just never corrected the picture, and the picture is of a guy who's comfortable. Maybe a little frugal, nothing special. That's on purpose. While the whole world runs toward the things that look like money, you spent 20 years quietly buying the things that simply are it. And the day the number finally hit you, it hit you in a checkout line at a farm supply store, holding a bag of gravel and a receipt, while a teenager scanned your items and didn't look up once. This is what real money looks like. And it started with a coin-operated car wash off a county road. Not a plan. Not ambition. Just a Saturday, sitting in your truck waiting for a bay to open up, watching car after car pull in and feed quarters into a machine, and instead of being impatient, you did something most people never do. You got curious. You thought, somebody owns this. Who? You went home and spent an hour finding out. What you learned was that a 4-bay self-serve car wash on a decent road can quietly clear anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000 a month, that it runs mostly on its own, and that the ones that go under almost always go under because the owner got bored or got old, not because the demand dried up. Cars get dirty. That doesn't stop for a recession. You didn't have car wash money, but you had a little, and you had patience, which turned out to matter more. Your first thing wasn't the car wash. It was smaller. A laundromat, half dead, in a working-class part of town that a tired owner named Gene was almost giving away because his knees were done and his kids didn't want it. You put down $19,000. The machines were old, but they ran. The books were kept in a shoebox. Underneath the shoebox, the cash was real. The first month, you cleared it yourself. After the water bill and 2 repairs and driving out there 4 times, you netted $220. $220. Your brother-in-law spent more than that on a watch that same week. Nobody congratulated you. Nobody knew there was anything to congratulate. You sat with that number on a Sunday night and felt something with no clean name, not pride, not letdown, something quieter underneath both. But you didn't walk away. Because you weren't looking at the $220. You were looking at what it proved. That the thing worked. That it paid you while you slept. That the machine didn't need you. So you bought the car wash next. Then a second laundromat. And you started looking at the whole world differently, not as a customer standing in line, but as someone trying to see who owned the floor under everybody's feet. That's how you ended up owning storage units. You found out a modest self-storage lot off a highway exit can bring in $100,000 a year and barely needs a human being on site. People fill those units, and then, out of guilt or inertia, keep paying for years to store things they'll never look at again. It's not a nice fact. It's just a durable one. You bought your first facility with the profit from the laundromats and a loan you paid off early. And the year it cleared $46,000 net, you didn't celebrate. You used it as the down payment on the next. That's the part nobody ever sees. Not the growth, not the portfolio, not the compounding of 20 years of small decisions. Just a person at a kitchen table near midnight, running numbers nobody asked them to run. A Saturday question that became a Wednesday purchase, that became something there still isn't a good word for. By the time your accountant, a blunt woman named Paula, who'd kept books for small operators for a quarter century and did not flatter anyone, finally sat down with the full list of what you owned. She read it twice, set it down, and said, "This might be the most boring pile of money I've ever seen." She meant it as a jab. You took it as the best thing anyone had ever said about your work. Because that was the entire point. Not a brand, not a vision, not a company with a logo and a story, just a quiet stack of things that solve dull, permanent human problems and pay you every month whether you're paying attention or not. Here's what was on the list. 3 laundromats, 2 self-serve car washes, 4 self-storage facilities across 2 states, a few acres of land under 3 highway billboards. You don't own the advertising, you own the ground it stands on. And companies lease that dirt from you on 15-year contracts you sometimes forget you hold. A stake in a boring little water and vending route. And, the biggest piece, a commercial landscaping and snow removal company you bought from a man named Hollis, who'd spent 30 years building it into something that ran on its own momentum, a handful of contracts with office parks and a hospital and a county, just under $2 million a year in revenue. Thin margins, deeply unglamorous, and completely reliable. Grass grows. Snow falls. Somebody has to deal with both. Every year, forever, Paula asked if you were finally going to do something interesting with all this. Something with upside. A real estate play, maybe tech. You told her no. She nodded like she'd expected it and didn't quite understand it. What she couldn't see was the logic under the boredom. Every single thing you owned served a need that never goes away, not in a downturn. Not when rates spike. Not when some new app changes how people shop, or talk, or work. Nobody is going to disrupt a storage unit. No startup is going to out-innovate a parking lot full of dirty cars. There's no competitor coming for grass. And that's the whole strategy. You built your life out of the things nobody finds worth fighting over. The flashy ones, the people raising money, chasing the next big thing, performing their portfolios out loud. They live in markets where being interesting is the cost of staying alive, where one bad quarter can erase 3 good years. You went the other way, deliberately, almost stubbornly. You live in the Tuesday morning markets, the quiet ones nobody's watching, the ones still running long after the exciting thing down the road has shut its doors. And you learn to guard that quiet. There's always a man at every gathering wearing a plain shirt that costs more than your monthly fuel bill, telling anyone within earshot about his deals. He's performing wealth, carefully, at real cost. You show up in a truck old enough to vote, wearing a jacket that was on sale, a watch that only tells time. When someone asks what you do, you say you own a few small businesses, laundromats, some other odds and ends. And you watch them quietly file you under doing okay, not worth the real conversation, and turn towards someone shinier. Good, because the second someone underestimates you, they stop watching you. And once they stop watching, you're free to do anything you want. That's the thing people misunderstand about staying invisible. They think it's humility. For you, it's armor, and you put it on every morning on purpose. The old truck isn't a statement, it's a tool. It starts every time, and it draws zero attention in any parking lot in the country. Every dollar not spent looking rich goes somewhere that compounds instead. Simple math. Just unpopular. Because being seen is expensive in ways that have nothing to do with money. The moment people know what you have, they start relating to what you have instead of to you. The requests appear. A relative you haven't heard from in years suddenly finds a reason to call. You've watched money change the temperature of a room the instant it becomes visible. It isn't cruelty. Most of it isn't even on purpose. It's just what money does to the space around it once people can see it. So you keep the space clean. You know that cost better than most. Because of Danny. Danny's been your friend since you were kids. The kind who calls on a random Tuesday for no reason at all. A while back he called, and this time there was something underneath it. He'd spent 3 years building a small auto repair shop into something with a real reputation. And he wanted to buy the building next door and expand. He needed $70,000. You could have sent it before the call ended, from your phone, standing in a storage lot. Without feeling it, $70,000 is maybe 2 weeks of cash flow across what you own. It wasn't a sacrifice. It wasn't even a decision. On paper. But you didn't send it. You sat there listening, feeling the full weight of knowing exactly what you could do, and choosing not to. That feeling has no clean name. It isn't guilt. It isn't selfishness. It's the specific loneliness of understanding a situation more clearly than the person you love who's living inside it. Because here's what you'd learned. Slowly and at real cost, money handed to someone who isn't ready for it Doesn't fix the problem, it just speeds up whatever's already there. Loose operations get looser. And then the money's gone. And usually so is a piece of the friendship. So instead of a check, you asked if you could come by that weekend. You sat in Danny's cramped office with a notepad and went through his numbers for a whole afternoon. You found two costs quietly draining him. You asked about the terms on the building, the interest. What happens in a slow winter questions he didn't have answers to, not because he wasn't sharp, but because nobody had ever sat down and walked through them with him. You came back the next weekend, and the one after. By the third, Danny had renegotiated a supplier deal, found a small business loan he actually qualified for, and reworked the whole plan so it didn't need outside money at all. He bought the building 4 months later. He called you the night he signed, a little choked up, and said he couldn't have done it without you. You never told him what you could have written the check for. You never will. That's not modesty. It's just knowing what the story needed to be his, built by his own hands, in a way no money from you could have replaced. But there are rooms in your life nobody gets to enter. And that's the part that never gets easier, sitting across a desk from someone you love, watching them fight through something you could erase in a minute, and knowing that erasing it would be the wrong thing to do. The number finally caught up with you on a Wednesday morning in the checkout line of a farm supply store, holding a bag of gravel for a drainage problem at one of the car washes. Your phone buzzed. An email from Paula, same plain formatting she'd used for 25 years. Year-end summary. You almost pocketed the phone. Then the number at the top stopped you. You read it twice, slow, the way you read something you're not sure you're reading right. Total net worth across everything you owned had crossed $390 million. You stood there under the buzzing lights. A kid scanned your gravel without looking up. A woman behind you shifted her cart. Nobody knew. The store didn't know. The number lived in an email, on a phone, in the hand of a man buying a $4 bag of gravel for a drain. That was the moment. No champagne. No phone call telling you you'd made it. Just fluorescent light and the smell of feed and fertilizer, and a number that had been quietly stacking up through 20 years of decisions nobody ever photographed. You thought it would feel like something. A shift in the air. A seam between before and after. There was no seam, just the checkout line, and the beep of the scanner, and the steady hum of a life that hadn't changed because a number changed. You paid. You didn't use a rewards card, because you can never remember if you have one. In the truck, you sat a moment before starting the engine. 20 years ago, you netted $220 from a half-dead laundromat and didn't know what to call the feeling. This was the exact same feeling, just with a lot more zeros behind it. And that's not nothing. It might be everything, because it means the feeling was never about the number. It was about the architecture, the quiet proof that a thing you built runs the way you built it. With no drama, no applause, and nobody in the checkout line having the faintest idea. You start the truck. The drainage problem won't fix itself. And somewhere this week, you'll watch someone spend money just to look like they have it. And you'll notice the thing you couldn't have named 20 years ago, that the performance of wealth and the actual architecture of it almost never live in the same person. The knowing doesn't make the week any easier, but it does make you wonder what you're really building and who it's for.